Maybe the most important moment in the history of home video in America happened in 1984, and I'm taking this from this book, Disney War by James B. Stewart, one of my favorite books about the history of the movie industry. In 1984, the new executive team led by Michael Eisner was taking over the Walt Disney Company. Many of his executives that he worked with at Paramount were coming over from Paramount, and one of these executives was named Bill Mechanic, and he was put in charge of the home video unit of the Walt Disney Company. And this was considered something of this was one of the less desirable jobs. But at this point in time, in the mid 1980s, VCRs were pretty popular in America, but the model was not that people would purchase movies. It was strictly a rental based business. Most VHSs were generally priced at like $80 to $100. So video stores bought them, and then you went to the video store to rent them. At the same time, Disney for decades had made a lot of money by putting out their classic animated films in theaters again and again and again. They would usually cycle them in and out of theaters every 7 years with the idea that the audience would turn over, like a new generation would see these movies in theaters and grow attached to them and then want to see them again 7 years later and buy the merchandise and go to the theme parks. That was the way it worked. For example, the previous year, 1983, Disney put Snow White into theaters. At that point, it was a movie that was 46 years old, and it was a giant hit for them. It made $30 million. Adjusted for inflation, that's about $95 million today for a 46-year-old movie. Until basically Disney Plus retained the sort of idea of the Disney Vault of you only make things available for a certain amount of time, and then you take them away. But okay, so it's 1984. Bill Mechanic is in charge of the home video division, and he wants to sell at least one of Disney's classic animated titles on VHS, but the company is very resistant to it. So they're debating it. And his compromise is we'll put it out, but we'll market it as a collector's item. The Disney Classics line is what they'll call it. It'll be considered a collector's item. And, you know, this is, I guess, the forerunner of VHSs and DVDs and Blu-rays being called collector's editions. So, yeah, they'd price it at $79.95, expensive enough such that it wouldn't eat into the theatrical business of re-releasing the old movies, but people who wanted to buy the VHSs would buy them. But this wasn't working very well. Sales were tepid. So this executive, Bill Mechanic, tried an experiment and just went ahead and cut the price to $30. And then he gave Pinocchio, which was the movie that they were trying this with, give it a huge marketing push. He spent $7 million on a marketing campaign for Pinocchio's VHS release. And this was the equivalent of like a theatrical new movies marketing budget. And it was an enormous success. It exceeded everybody's expectations. They made $50 million in sales. This is way more money than they had made with a new movie in theaters in a long, long, long time. And this is for an old movie that they didn't have to pay to produce again. So it was like found money essentially for them. So the next movie they tried this with was Sleeping Beauty. It was an even bigger success. They made $90 million in sales. And finally, they released Cinderella, which was the biggest hit of all. 6 million copies sold on VHS, $180 million in sales. And Disney, as a result, stopped leaning on releasing its old classics in theaters because they were making so much money from selling their old movies on VHS. And then, of course, in the 90s, they started making straight-to-video movies, and that's a big success too, but that's a story for another day. Just a very important moment in the history of home video in America, maybe the most important moment in the history of home video in America.